Hey there, my name is Andrew Brzezinski, and I'm a professional photographer based in Montreal, and I hope you're hungry and you brought your syrup, because today we're going to be talking about pancake lenses with the 7artisans 35mm f5.6. So before I begin, I'd like to thank Pergear for supplying this 7artisans 35mm f5.6 for the review. I've had it in my possession for a little while now, and I really got to put it through its paces so I can talk to you guys about the image quality and the user experience and how it relates to me as a photographer. So I'll drop their links in the description below. You guys can check them out. And let's get into this lens. So it is a positively tiny lens. I always say to my fellow Leica shooters, the alternative is a body cap. So here we are. It is tiny. It takes up absolutely no room in your bag, and you're better off just leaving it on a camera when you're storing it because it's just so small. Slip it into your bag and voila. It is a simple lens design, but don't let that fool you. The image quality is actually fantastic, and I'm gonna get into that in a second. The lens focuses with a stick right here. It travels quite quickly through its focus range, and it being a maximum, well, only aperture of f5.6 and having no diaphragm, so no aperture blades either, you will benefit from having pretty much a point and shoot M camera experience. And it's so point and shoot that unfortunately you don't have any rangefinder coupling. So that is the biggest drawback of this lens, I would say, is that it's not rangefinder coupled. It's unfortunate, but if you're a seasoned zone focus shooter, well, you won't really have too much of a problem, and I found that I got used to it immediately, so it wasn't a big deal. And if you have a digital M, well, you could just use live view and cheat. Well, if your digital M has live view, let's say, and it's pretty simple to use. I got used to it in about a day, and then I was already shooting with my film M's with it, so no big deal. Otherwise, I do really like this integrated lens shade. It's really handy when you're putting it into your pockets or anything like that. And since it's so small, I would hate to buy a random filter for this thing, like a 28 Summaron. You know, those 37mm filters are a pain in the butt. This guy doesn't have one, so even better. And you can just cover the lens when you're putting it away. I love this thing. Otherwise, it focuses down to 0.3 meters, which is freaking handy. I was so nostalgic, I guess you could say, because I haven't used a lens that can focus down this close in quite some time now, and it was so handy. When I just got the lens, I went for dinner with my fiance, and we just started taking pictures of our food and our drinks with it, and I was like, oh my god, this is so freaking fun. So if you want to take pictures of products or people close up or whatever, very handy. You know, who needs an Apo Summicron when you can just get a $200 7artisans 35 f5.6, and you're going to see the image quality out of this thing pretty damn good. So that's pretty much it. It's positively tiny. You can just slide it onto your M's, and the mounting hardware is all metal, and it seems to be brass. The internals seem to be metal, although the lens casing looks like it's plastic, but it's hard to see. The front of this lens is an anodized aluminum, and everything else seems to be brass. Although this focus stick doesn't really look like brass. It looks like some kind of other metal, but I have no idea. So good weight to it, and it's very receded into the lens body. Kind of makes your M look a little more modern or something. I like it on the chrome bodies, I really do. It looks kind of cool and funky. And whenever I talk to people about it, they always ask me what it is. So the image quality, let's talk about the sharpness right away. In the center of the image at any given point in its focus, in its focus, whatever, travel, very sharp. At infinity, it's sharp from edge to edge, though the corners do have a bit of smearing to them. Not a big deal. I expected some kind of shortcoming, and that would probably be the only one, I would say, optically speaking, because otherwise I like everything else about this lens, but it's very personal, and you'll see in the images. So focusing down, so when you open the lens, there's a little click, a little slight indent, like an aperture click, and it lets you know haptically that you are at infinity. So infinity with a 35mm at 5.6, it's pretty much like, what, I think 2 meters to infinity. It's very, very far. Then as you get through the travel, it stops at 0.3 meters. So at infinity, it's sharp. As you get closer towards the minimum focusing distance, the center is always very sharp, but the bokeh, which you actually do have quite a bit of because you're getting pretty damn close, gets a little busy, and it gets not that uniform either. It really looks like you're pushing this lens past its comfort zone. It's not a pretty look. Things get smeared and your image quality really starts to degrade towards the edges more and more. I would say you could comfortably focus this thing down to 0.7 meters. At 0.3 meters in the center region of your image, things are very sharp, and I would really say they're passable. I actually like the image, but towards the outer third portion of your image, it's a bit too busy and too soft to look any good, but you know, you can use it, so there it is. Otherwise, another shortcoming of that close focusness of this lens is that when the lens is tucked away into the camera, when the front element is tucked away into the lens, it's quite shielded off by any stray light, and the colors and the flare resistance are actually quite good. But when the lens pokes itself out, that's when you start to see a completely different rendering in a way. There is a lot of veiling and a loss of contrast, and it really gets a little busy. It's kind of unpredictable if you're shooting with any overhead lighting. If you're not outdoors, let's say, you start to see that happen. I did find that to be something to look out for while I was using it. It didn't really bother me that much, but when I was using it for paid gigs, I would tend to back away because I didn't want to focus too close with it because I knew that was going to happen. Although using the close focus adapter, the Voigtlander one, on my Sony cameras, I mounted this onto it and I shot a 1984 Corvette the other day, and I wound up using the close focus adapter as not only a more precise focusing tool, because the stick isn't that precise, I find, and it also let me keep that front element tucked inside the lens, shield it from any light, and I actually got rid of all of the, veiled flaring. So it was really good. So if you have a Sony camera and you have that close focus adapter or any other mirrorless adapted lenses, mirrorless cameras with an adapter that close focuses, rather than focusing with this stick, just throw this lens onto that and you're better off, because when this front element comes out of the body, things start getting very hazy. But it's kind of a fun look, and it gives it a little bit of a classic charm. I don't mind it, but knowing that it's there and knowing that I can work around it, sometimes I'd rather work around it than just have a veiled flare coming and dominating my image. Once any harsh light gets into the frame, I'm not going to see any crazy flaring. It's more just like veiled flares constantly. The lens design is so simple. It's just a 5-element f5.6 lens. It's got to be a really easy lens to design, but that also plays into how sharp it is, but also that the flare resistance is just really isn't all that there, I find. But it's, it's workable. I like it. And the contrast of the lens is very good, unless you get flaring. But I love the rendering of this lens. I really think it's a phenomenal lens, and I really, really adore the feel of it. It's like a nice mix between the 35 Distagon I have right here and the 35 Summaron. The sharpness, the colors, the feel of the modern feel of it remind me of the Distagon, and the glowiness, that lower overall contrast that you get in some situations also reminds me of the Summaron. It really is a treat to use. I really enjoy it. It's really hard to put a nail on, I have to say. So chromatic aberration and fringing and all that, I really didn't run into too much of that. So I can't really say that there is any. If there are, it's really not noticeable. And then there is coma and all that. Yes, there is some. I shot it at night a few times. It's not going to be the best in that aspect, but that's not what this lens is about, really. You're spending around $200 for a tiny lens. Let's talk about how sharp it is. It's sharp, sharp, sharp. And it's a blast, and you can just treat this lens like a point and shoot camera, and that's the whole joy of this thing. Is it's such a liberating experience, walking around shooting from the hip or just focusing on the fly with it, just knowing that right when you click and it locks into infinity, that's when you know you can just boom 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 boom, just be trigger happy and shoot, because everything is in focus. It's so much fun. I really enjoyed the experience of this lens, and I love the images coming out of this thing. They're saturated, they're punchy, they're sharp. There is a bit of vignetting, but it really adds to that charm of it. It has a very classic feel to it, and I think that this is an easy, justifiable purchase for any mirrorless or Leica shooter. Just get one of these things and throw it onto your body when you're putting it away or putting it into your bag, and you can always know that you can just whip it out real quick and take a picture, because it's a lot of fun. I know that it not being rangefinder coupled can be a deterrent for most, but I found that it really wasn't as big as a deal as I thought it would be, and live view really did help overcome that. But one thing I have to say is that, and I'll reiterate, I guess, is that as you get closer through the travel of the lens, f5.6 is a lot more shallow than you anticipate. And I did come into many instances where I missed the focus when I thought I wouldn't. And the focusing isn't that easy to read, because it's infinity. It's at infinity right there, and then getting down to 0.5 meters is your next legible distance scale. Your next point on your distance scale is right there. So it's not that easy to really guesstimate when you're focusing. So I find live view helps, but I got used to it pretty quickly, and I'm pretty comfortable at gauging where I am in my travel. But I find between infinity and that 0.5 meter mark, I did miss a lot of shots. So it really just jumps into, close focus once it gets into below infinity. I mean, that's pretty much it, I have to say. There's not much else to talk about this lens other than the fact that it's just fun to use. It really is like I said, a very free feeling experience with this camera. I love having it on any of my M's. It's just a fun little thing to use. You're not really overthinking anything because there's no aperture to control, and you really just treat it like a point and shoot. I did enjoy slapping a flash onto my M's and just going around and taking pictures with this thing, because it really is just a point and shoot camera alternative at this point, a very expensive one at that. So for the heck of it, I compared the lens to my 35 Distagon and my 35 Summaron, and I was quite impressed to see how sharp this lens is. It's not as sharp as both of them, but it's very, very damn close. And the contrast of this lens really makes the images feel sharper than they are when you're looking at them on a screen or in a print. I find that if you're not pixel peeping, this thing really shines. The contrast and the colors coming out of it are phenomenal. And I think that plays into how I had such a hard time picking the pictures out from my roster in my negatives, because it's so similar to my 35 Distagon stop down as well as my 35 Summaron that it made things really confusing. There are two things that I can point out from any picture looking at that was taken with this lens. One of them is that there is some barrel distortion. The top, barrel distortion, it's just simple barrel distortion. You can correct for it in post. It's not a big deal, but it's quite pronounced. And the other thing, like I said, when you're getting close into the focusing, the shallow depth of field, the bokeh towards the edges just gets a little bit more and more busy and kind of blurry, and it really just looks like the lens is getting pushed to its extremes. But it's a wonderful lens, and the image quality is actually very rewarding. So I think it's a really cool little treat to have, especially when the alternative is just to have a body cap. And I think that if you're curious about it, it's not really a huge wallet buster to try out. I would really recommend one of these if you're curious, or if you just lost your Leica body cap. Just get one of these things. They're a total fun little nice way to just use a Leica M differently for the first time in a while. I thought this was a nice little experience for that. So that's pretty much it. I'd like to thank Pergear for supplying the lens once again, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the comments. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. See you guys around.